Welcome to another episode of Optimal Health for Busy Entrepreneurs. I am your host, Julian Hayes II, back at it again. And today's topic is inspired by a conversation that I had with a lady about the overall landscape of health and where it's going. In particular, I wanted to discuss lab testing, genetic testing, and a handful of things around this area. This is generally think of this as direct to consumer. Now, all with the idea when it comes to direct to consumer that you don't have to wait any longer before getting the proper care and attention for your well-being. This is a super fantastic thing. You can now bypass insurance. You can truly act with a proactive mentality instead of being reactive, which is a much needed thing. And the best way to combat aging, if you actually think about this, is to never quote unquote get old in the first place. And when I say combat aging, I am referencing how the typical person thinks about aging. This is how the typical person thinks about aging. And I will always say that aging needs a rebrand. Maybe I'm the person to do it. Maybe, I don't know. I did have a degree in marketing in undergrad, but it feels like so long ago. Anyway, when you think about aging, the typical person thinks about they have a colder overall body temperature, they have weight gain, they have less energy, they have achy joints, and they have a general sense of a loss of doing things that they used to do. Now, nevertheless, though, before I dive into this fatal flaw of these direct-to-consumer tests, I want to first acknowledge some of the biggest benefits that these tests do possess. And the first benefit that we have to think about is simply freedom. And when it comes to freedom, look, I'm a capitalist. I highly value freedom. I don't take it for granted. I could easily go on a rant about this when it comes to freedom, capitalism, but I want to keep this as a health podcast and everything, but maybe I'll do another podcast one day where I get to go into some of these other topics, but I want to stay on brand here, right? But the biggest and maybe the most obvious benefit, once again, is freedom. And specifically, you have the autonomy over your body and health to do whatever the hell that you want to do with it. Beforehand, you would have to go to a healthcare provider and hopefully get them to order you a specific lab test. Now, providing they actually do this, because sometimes you will not be able to get certain labs because you're not quote unquote sick. You're not showing symptoms. You're not in this category that's established by the establishment. We all know who the establishment is. Wink, wink. Now, you also will have to hope then that your insurance covers this test, or you're going to be paying out of pocket, and this likely is going to have an unnecessary markup. Now, the second benefit here with these direct-to-consumer tests is that you have awareness now. You're able to get personalized, detailed information about your health, about your fitness, about potential disease risks, and many other traits, even about your neurotransmitters and just how your brain operates. And just like even your cognitive ability. I know one of the things that I offer inside the practice and firm is a CNSVS test. I might have got those initials wrong, but it's a super easy test to do. And you're doing a bunch of different cognitive computational tests to see just how optimal is your brain operating for your age. And all these things in a nutshell, they help you become more proactive about your health and fitness. Once again, the best way to combat aging is to never get old in the first place. That is how you be ageless. Now, these are two immense benefits that can literally save you pain, stress, and heartache down the line. And of course, it will save you when it comes to your wealth as well. Now, think about having access to not only your genetics, which is important and is the foundation, because we need to know what truly makes us who we uniquely are. But think about having something as a true age test that measures your chronological age versus your biological age. I think about how ASCVD, which is atherosclerotic cardiovascular disease. This is the #1 killer in the developed world. And cardiovascular disease in particular, various forms of it, has run rampant throughout my family tree. And I think about something like LPA, which is the single most important genetically inherited trait when it comes to ASCVD. It's the most important genetically inherited trait risk with this killer here. This affects 15 to 20% of the population. What if we just simply demanded and made standard this test early to check our levels? Now, before I go any further here, as I mentioned all of this, I am no doctor. This is not medical advice. I have no interest in being a doctor. 1 year was enough for me. No mas, no more of it. Don't want to do it. So this is not medical advice. You go talk to your doctors or go talk to your health coaches, whoever you're working with. But if you haven't heard of LPA, as since I'm throwing this around, this stands for lipoprotein A. This is a low density lipoprotein that transports cholesterol in your blood. This test here determines the level of lipoprotein in your blood. And then these results are going to be used to diagnose several diseases, especially those that are related to the heart, especially the one I mentioned just recently with the ASCVD. Now, as I think about this world where there's more freedom, there's more autonomy, there's more awareness for our health, you're able to get ahead of so many potential ailments. You're able to build more wealth because if you're healthier, you have more energy, you can be more productive, you can further build that generational wealth that is so critical. I think about also now glycans and just how crucial they are. But there's very little discussion in mainstream medicine when it comes to glycans. Now, a brief primer on glycans is that these are sugar molecules that surround and modify proteins in your body. They respond to your lifestyle choices and indicate the inflammatory state of your immune system. Now, this in turn plays a key role in determining your biological age. And these glycans have a huge influence on your overall biology. And they're actually regulated almost equally by your genes on one side and then the environment and the lifestyle choices that we make on the other. But as we age, the balance of these pro-inflammatory and anti-inflammatory glycans in our body changes. Using something as this glycan age test to measure these glycans gives you a beautiful snapshot of your health. And that is something that is immensely beneficial. You know, these glycans they can foresee potential ailments before symptoms will show up. And I believe the number was around 7 to 9 years. They could see potential ailments 7 to 9 years before something actually shows up. 7 to 9 years. That's huge. You know, I interviewed Professor Gordon a lot on episode 139, where we discussed all things glycan. So go check out that episode if you haven't. Now, this 7 to 9 year head start of potentially turning a potential ailment around before it morphs into something more serious, this is literally life changing. And that's part of what generational health is about. But this type of information, of course, is not being discussed. You know, as I mentioned way back in episode 1, the health revolution will not be televised. So all this is fantastic. But there's one huge fatal flaw that I see happening. It must be addressed. And it's crucial that you keep this in mind as you move into this new paradigm of health and wellness. This fatal flaw is lack of interpretation. Data alone is limiting. And I want you to keep this in mind, that data alone is limiting. The possibility of receiving confusing health information could lead you to take unnecessary actions just because of what's on a piece of paper. Now, you can receive this information that leads to unexpected emotions based on the results you got. This information that you get could actually move you toward a misdiagnosis. And you can also have something of over testing. You get a certain result back, and now you want to go do more tests and more tests and more tests, because this world of health, this world of biohacking, this world of precision health, there's a never-ending cycle, a never-ending assortment of tools and tactics and strategies that you can actually use. So when you receive all of this data back from these various tests, I want you to also include the data from the various wearables that we have. With all these things, there's little to no interpretation of the numbers. And even more so, most importantly, there's little to no personalization to take into account for how the human body operates. For example, with genetics, just because you have a certain gene doesn't mean that it's going to express in a negative, non-ideal way. I'll use myself as an example here. I'm in an extremely high category for insulin resistance and blood sugar issues. You can decode that and call it diabetes, but I like blood sugar issues and insulin resistance. That's legal jargon speak, because I'm not your doctor. So this is not medical advice. Now, if someone just went by face value with the results that I said and the results that I had and I looked into, without taking into account the various nuances and second and third order effects, I, along with anyone else, could unnecessarily start a regimen that's counterproductive. And, so in my case here, I have these genes, but epigenetically, they're not expressing. And how do I know this? It's not guessing. It's not hoping. It's not wishing. It's actually because I test. It's actually because I measure. I test my A1C. I test my fasting insulin. I test my fasting glucose to get a complete metabolic look at how this blood sugar is operating. And I can see how it looks with these labs. And this is one of the many reasons why a systems mentality is a necessity. I want you to think like a CEO. Keep the entire organization in mind, because everything connects with everything. There are no silos. Everything dramatically interacts with each other. And the same applies to things like the FTO gene, which many associate with obesity. There are no absolutes. There are only probabilities and likelihoods, with the odds on some things being higher for others while lower for the other person. And this is why a precision-based approach is a necessity. This is why this needs to be a new standard when it comes to health. We don't all need the same supplements. We don't all need the same exercise regimen. We don't all need the same sleep protocol. We don't all need the same nutritional regimen. Ultimately, we do not need the same regimen to be ageless. The path to achieving generational health is different for each of us. So as we land this ship here, it's imperative to keep in mind that if you do utilize these various direct-to-consumer tests, don't develop tunnel vision. Operate with a wide lens. Think in terms of a system. If your genetics say one thing, cool. But I want you to pause and reflect before reacting and taking action. Is this gene actually expressing itself in your day-to-day life? Do the labs match up with the genetics? There are nuances to health optimization. As with anything, there is a duality. These tests are excellent at prevention, but when not properly utilized, they could lead to further confusion. They could lead to paralysis by analysis. In all those cases, the person is not taking action. So as always, any questions, feel free to message me on social or shoot me an email at julian@theartoffitnessandlife.com. If you're interested in having a bespoke holistic strategy created and implemented for you so you can precisely upgrade your entire human system, be ageless, stay at the top of your game no matter your age, and ultimately create the generational health and wealth so you can run around with your great-great-grandchildren, there's a link in the show notes, or you can just email me to get the process started. And until next time, stay awesome, be limitless, and never stop upgrading. Peace.